You may have seen news coverage lately about the proposed National Association of Realtors, NAR, settlement as it's faced allegations across the country that it's participated in a conspiracy to fix prices with regards to commissions paid on the sale of residential real estate. Now, coverage of the proposed settlement has been fairly inaccurate. I'm not normally one to go on the internet and complain about the media, but in this case, there has been a lot of misinformation or at least misleading information. So let's take a quick look at what's actually in the settlement so far. First thing to note is that right now it's still a proposed settlement. For this to be enacted and to be accepted, the court has to agree to it. Now, I think the National Association plans to put these practices in place whether the court accepts the settlement offer or not, but there could be changes made to the court to make this acceptable. We'll only know that with time. The first change being made has to do with how buyer-agent compensation is delivered or at least communicated. As you know, the current practice is if you sell your house, you agree to pay your agent X, and that agent will take a portion of that and offer it out to buyer agents if they're willing and able to bring a buyer in that can close on the purchase of your home. So you pay your agent and your agent allocates a certain amount of that to buyer agents. Despite what you may have heard in the news, that isn't going to change. That arrangement is still allowed. It will probably remain the norm for quite some time to come. The only change that's actually come in or would come if the settlement is accepted is that seller agents will no longer be allowed to advertise what the buyer agent commission is in the MLS. They can do it on other websites. They can point buyer agents to other websites to find out if there's a compensation agreement in place. It just can't be in the MLS. This, again, one place where the coverage has been largely inaccurate. How you pay your agent doesn't have to change. Whether your agent will offer money out to buyer agents also doesn't have to change. Plenty of other coverage has said this is the first time sellers will be able to openly negotiate whether or not they have money allocated in the seller agent compensation to pay for a buyer agent. But this isn't the first time. That practice has been allowed and it's been negotiable since the practice began in the early 90s. Most agents have said we need to offer money as compensation to the buyer agent. Otherwise, the buyer would have to pay it themselves. And if they're not accustomed to doing that, they may skip your home. Now, there has also been concerns that if the money offered to a buyer agent is too low, the buyer agent might not be as inclined to advocate for your home in the market. Now, that's an ethical consideration, and it was one of the issues brought up in the lawsuits. So part of the notion of the settlement is that if buyer agents don't have their compensation advertised, this kind of removes that. Honestly, I don't know if it does. I don't see not advertising compensation in the MLS as really that good a solution for any of the things that are being discussed, but that's what's in the proposed settlement. But again, it doesn't change any of the practices that are here right now, at least not by law or by the rule of the association. The second notable change that comes as part of the proposed settlement has to do with buyers and meeting with an agent. Currently, there are buyer representation agreements where if you choose to buy a house, you may have to sign something with your agent stating that you're working with them exclusively and that if you purchase a home, they will be compensated as your representative, even if you wind up trying to go through another agent. It also states what their compensation would be, and if that compensation amount isn't met by the offer from the seller agent, that you as the buyer would make up the difference. Now, most agents don't use these. I frankly haven't used them in 20 years. I've always preferred a handshake and trust. But going forward, the National Association has said that its members will be required to have a signed agreement to meet with a buyer. That means if you want to look at a house with a realtor, meaning a real estate agent who's part of the association, and almost all of us are, you'll have to have a signed agreement. Now, this agreement may not commit you to anything long-term. I think in theory, there will be agreements that say, we're just going to look at one house together. After that, we can decide if we want to extend our contract. But going forward, buyers will have to sign some sort of agreement with an agent to go look at any houses together. Again, these will include the details of what the relationship would be and what the buyer agent's compensation plan would be, with notes that if the buyer agent is not compensated through the seller's agent, that the buyer will have to come up with a way to pay them. Again, technically this isn't new. It's just not been required before that the buyer and the agent have a signed agreement in place. That would change if the NAR settlement proposal is accepted by the court. In short, those are the two big ones that would have any impact potentially on the public. I don't know that technically buyer agent compensation being advertised in the MLS has much impact on you, but there's theories that it could. Now, if you're out looking at homes or want to go home shopping, yes, having to sign something with a buyer agent before you can do so will be a bit of a change, and it's going to rattle some buyers going forward. But as of right now, those are the two biggest changes. The other big notable item is that if this is accepted, the association and the brokerages covered would no longer be able to be sued on the subject anywhere in the country. One of the big reasons that the association has changed its course and decided to settle rather than continue to fight cases around the country and appeal the one that they lost in Missouri is that just to appeal in Missouri, the association would have to come up with over $1 billion in bond money to keep it alive. The association doesn't have that. So, stated more succinctly, the association would have to go bankrupt to continue to fight this. So they've made the decision instead to offer a $418 million settlement and make some changes to how some practices or some business matters are done. In order for the association to appeal the Missouri case, they'd have to come up with about $1.5 billion in bond money. The association doesn't have $1.5 billion, and that wouldn't even cover the cost of fighting lawsuits elsewhere around the country. So the president of NAR has been open. Financially, they have to settle because they can't afford to fight, or else they'd have to go bankrupt. So those are the two main issues that come up as part of the proposed settlement agreement. I'm not saying that there won't be changes coming, but those will be driven by the market more so than they will driven by the industry, because nothing in the proposed settlement really changes that much as to how things are done. It just makes it more likely that there will be more variation as to how things are done. And more variation may be good for everybody. If you have any specific questions as to how this could impact your plans to purchase or sell a home later this year when the new rules are expected to go into place, let me know and we can discuss your options, what the pros and cons may be of certain activities, and so forth. Look forward to talking to you soon.